So our team did a little research and found out that on any given week in Amazon's most read book list, between 60 and 80% of the books included pornographic content. Before we explore just how prevalent such books are becoming, let's ask the question, can we really consider romance novels pornographic? Now, some people have an anaphylactic reaction when people compare romance novels and romantasy to porn. They say, look, I don't even know how you can compare some spicy little harmless book with like the violently degrading content online. I mean, seriously, reading something recommended on Book Talk isn't exactly fueling the sex trafficking industry. Like, okay, fair point. If I'm reading a book about the Holocaust, am I guilty of committing genocide? Obviously not. I mean, right, there's a pretty serious difference between reading about something and doing that thing. So the question is not about which is worse, right? You know, visual depictions of sexuality or verbal depictions of it. Rather, the question we got to ask is, how do we distinguish what is good from what is evil? I mean, what makes all the nudity in the Sistine Chapel good, but porn degrading? Like, why is it okay to have an erotic love poem in the middle of the Bible, but it's bad if it's on my Kindle, right? Well, I think we got to define porn. Okay, porn comes from a couple Greek words, porno graphikos, which means the writing or the drawings of prostitutes. And so there's really one big question you need to ask yourself. Well, if you watched what you were reading, would that be porn? Okay, ask yourself that again. If I were watching what I was reading, would that be porn? If so, then why isn't it porn when you read it? I mean, I don't understand how reading about it suddenly purifies it, right? You just basically become the porn producer with your own imagination. Now, I know that sounds a little bit harsh, and some of you might be thinking, look, should a man even be speaking about this? Well, for one, someone has to. I mean, no one's going to object to a woman making a video about the male porn epidemic. There's a deep craving for something, particularly by women here. So I think it's interesting to note, if you look at it, though, there's this male-female difference. I think it kind of looks like historically what the guys are after is one word, you know, Pornhub, Playboy, whatever, with 50,000 pictures. Whereas the women are kind of looking at one picture of Fabio or whatever, and then 50,000 words inside. Now, granted, not all porn is consumed by men. Plenty of girls are looking at that stuff. And most romance novels don't have some shirtless, long-haired guy riding on the horse on the cover. Right? Most covers look rather benign. Not many guys are actually interested in reading romance. They're not really interested in the story. I mean, perfect example. I knew a guy that was a United States Marine Corps, good dude, and he was at the barracks once, and he noticed so much porn they had on this bookshelf. This was way back in the day, these VHS cassettes of porn, and so the troops would be watching them on breaks, and one day there was like a break in the weekend where guys could go off base for a little rest, and he stayed behind, and he went to this bookshelf and he got all the porn off the bookshelf. And this is, like I said, old school VHS cassettes, and he's a bit of a technician. So he unscrewed the cassette thing, and then he pulls out the tape of the porn, and then he took other VHS cassettes of different recordings, like Veggie Tales he was able to find, and he put that inside the porn case.
The best kind of prize is a surprise.
If you like to talk to tomatoes.
He took Jesus of Nazareth, like a 6-hour movie, put that in another little porn video, screwed them all together, put it back on the shelf in the pornographic cases. So guys roll back in Saturday night or whatever, like, oh, they watch some porn.
Excuse me. Have we got a show for you?
And they throw the first one in. It's like dancing, singing tomatoes or whatever. Like, what the heck is this? They pull it out and they take another one and they put in the one that was Jesus of Nazareth. Now, Nathan didn't really rewind the video all the way. And so it's kind of in the middle of some scene. And so the guy's like, oh, okay, all right, this was in the cartoons. Let's see what's going on. I haven't seen this one before. And they're kind of sitting there and they're just like waiting and they're like, well, what is this? Like, well, maybe it has a plot. We have to wait for that to develop to get to the spicy stuff. And they ended up watching like hours of Jesus of Nazareth, eventually resigning to the fact that, oh, maybe this is something decent to watch. Nathan ended up getting a bunch of trouble for it, but, I think it was worth it. But the point here is men typically aren't interested in the plot, whereas women tend to enter the story. They want the context. So why so many women, though? I honestly think there's a legitimate ache here. But before we dive into that legitimate ache, let's just look at the stats. I mean, is it really that big of a problem? One of the guys on our team, Josiah, he's our content manager, did a little research, and he set up ChatGPT to simply answer 4 questions. Was there sex in it? How graphic was it? was there consent and were any of the participants underage? And so he kind of ran this through ChatGPT of all these different popular book manuscripts. And here's what they found out. The 100 most popular romances of the past 3 years on Goodreads, 96% of them contained at least one sex scene. On Book Talk, Book Talk is basically a part of TikTok where women recommend these kind of books to each other. When you search Book Talk, all of the top 12 results when it comes to these books were videos of people recommending at least one book with pornographic content. According to Publishers Weekly, best-selling print books by unit sales, 2023 bestsellers, 5 out of 10 of them were porn. 2024 bestsellers, 6 out of 10 had pornography. Where is all this stuff coming from? This is where I think we need to take a real serious look at the landscape of what's fueling all these things. First thing we got to consider, there's a mass objectification of women. And this has essentially resulted in a pandemic of women who doubt their desirability. And this is compounded by the fact that there's a whole culture of men who will not initiate. There's so many effeminate men who will not lead, will not initiate. They don't want to risk. Because they figured why bother to risk the public humiliation of rejection from a beautiful woman and the demands of commitment that might come with this when I can feel desired by a woman who is far more attractive than anyone I might meet in person and will never say no to me. Why risk? You add on top of this unprecedented number of women that have been sexually abused because they know they've been created for love, for intimacy, but then they fear this. And for many, these romance novels are kind of like a safe place to go where they can experience some type of sexual intimacy, but in a way that's kind of sterilized or safe from harm. And then finally, you add on to that this limitless access on screens to essentially meet any unmet need or desire. You add all this up and it's just a perfect storm because what women really want, as I said, they want an initiator, not a guy who's going to mamby-pamby, or as they call it, a simp today. They want a guy who's going to risk. They want a guy who's going to pursue her. And this desire, it's a good desire. I think another thing that women want that's especially highlighted in these romance novels, they want a dangerous man. And that I think is actually a good thing because the way I look at it, I mean, the world is a dangerous place, right? And they want a man who can actually engage in that, enter into that, contend with that danger, but at the same time be safe for her, to protect the family, to secure resources for the family, because there's going to be a time eventually where she's going to be vulnerable and she's going to find safety in what is powerful. And so they want a man who's capable of being dangerous, but safe to her. Unfortunately, this good desire thing gets twisted. I mean, you look at music in the last, I guess, forever. I mean, like, go back 10, 15, 20 years, Britney Spears. I remember that song, like, Mama, I'm in Love with a Criminal. It's like, good luck with that one. I was at the gym just the other day, and this song came on, kind of had a fun little beat to it. And I was trying to listen to the lyrics. I'm like, wait, what is it saying? It said, I'm in love with Godzilla. And I'm like, wait, what? You know, and I pulled up the lyrics on the phone, and it basically said this: I'm in love with Godzilla. It said, so big and so strong, turning me on, a killer. I'm in love with the dangerous kind, the dangerous minds. My heart will go blind, blind, blind. I'm in love with Godzilla. Now, I know you've always been wanting to have me sing that to you, but it's not going to happen. You know, not to be a Debbie Downer, but I don't think the Godzilla thing is going to work out long term, right? But like, why does she desire this powerful, like, bad boy image? Well, I think partly, as I said, there's a desire for safety, but there's also a thrill of the mystery. Can I domesticate him? Because what the deep ache there is tenderness on behalf of a powerful man. And now that we're on this whole topic of like romance novels and being seduced by the tenderness of a dangerous man, I thought it'd be kind of a good time to pause and give you an excerpt on tenderness from a Polish philosopher and bishop from the 1960s. I know it might seem like a little break from the topic, but the tenderness that you ache for is such a good desire. And listen to what this bishop said. His name was Karol Wojtyła. He became Pope John Paul II, and he wrote this in his book, Love and Responsibility. He said this: we must not forget that man's love must also contain certain elements of struggle for precisely that man for his true good. Tenderness that is too easy, especially called so-called mawkishness. Now, when I first read that, I'm like, what is mawkish? I had no idea. Pull out the dictionary. Mawkishness is basically PDA, right? I mean, you remember those couples in high school? They were just like all over each other in the hallway, and people are like, okay, enough. It's just like too much physical affection. John Paul says here, this so-called mawkishness does not induce deep trust. Quite the contrary. It arouses a suspicion that the man who is affectionate in this way seeks in the manifestations of tenderness only to satisfy his affectivity. And so the question is not, is he being tender to me? No, the question is why? Why is he being affectionate in that way? Because tenderness is more than just affection. John Paul points out it may be to satisfy his affectivity or perhaps even sensuality and the will to use. What is solely at stake, however, is tenderness. Without the virtue of temperance, without chastity and self-mastery, it is impossible to educate and develop tenderness in a man so that it does not hinder love, but serves it. Tenderness is the ability to feel the whole man, the whole person, in all, even the most hidden movements of his soul, but always bearing in mind the true good of that person. A woman expects this tenderness from a man. She has a particular right to it in marriage, in which she gives herself to man, where she experiences moments and periods that are tremendously important and difficult for her, such as pregnancy, childbirth, and all that's connected with them. Her affective or emotional life is at the same time in general more abundant, and hence comes a greater need for tenderness. A man also needs it, although in a different measure and different shape. Both in a woman and a man, tenderness evokes the conviction that one is not alone, that all by which one lives is also the content of the life of the other closest person. There can be no true tenderness without mature continence or self-control. How enormous and in effect, how positive a role abstinence fulfills here, for it liberates from that attitude and from egoism, and thereby indirectly forms love. The love of a woman and a man cannot be built otherwise than through a certain sacrifice and denial of oneself. There's a lot there, but what he's essentially saying is your craving for tenderness is a craving for a man to see the deepest movements of your heart, to anticipate those needs and not for an egotistical or lustful reason. And so your craving for a man who's tender within the power that he possesses is, again, it's a good desire. I think a woman also desires to be chosen, because when a woman's reading a romance novel, she's not simply reading about like a character. It's about substituting yourself for her. And when you do this with the faculties of your intellect, essentially with your imagination, it endows you with a temporary forgetfulness or amnesia. There's a comfort in forgetting that I don't have what I desire. And that's what we don't want to renounce. We don't want to let go of the medicinal effect of these things. That just for a minute, it makes me forget the fact that I don't have what I want. And I don't want to go there. I don't want to think about those things. But my challenge is to lean into that ache. What does that mean? We'll dive into that in a moment. But again, the good desire that's there, a good desire to be chosen. I think another desire that you have in reading the books is a desire for intimacy that's safe. I think in our desire, though, for safety and sexual intimacy, we actually settle for a sexuality that's sterilized. Think about it. Men being content with Pornhub. Woman is content with the books because he can't be rejected and she is always chosen. We're settling for the counterfeit because there's a fear of risk on behalf of the man or a fear on behalf of the woman that you're not really worth taking the risk. But the deepest ache we have is for a bond that's monogamous, life-giving, permanent, faithful, but we're settling for a love that's polygamous, it's lifeless, and it's temporary. And so I think if you just zoom out to the big picture, the ache is to be pursued in a culture where men have basically lost their interest to pursue. You want to be desired when you've concluded that you're basically undesirable. You want to be embraced when you feel alone. But to satiate all of these things through fantasy and reading this stuff, honestly, it's like looking through the window of a restaurant, hoping that you're going to be filled. You're not. You're just going to be inhaling Windex, right? And then when you walk away, you're hungrier than when you got there. And so in the same respect, when you close the book, when it's all over, all you're really left with is a deepened sense of what you do not have. If we just untwist romantasy, dark romance, even the BDSM, the erotica, if you really untwist all of this, I think what you'll find at the core is not something super duper evil. No, I think what you find here is an ache for God. There's a guy named Bruce Marshall. This quote is often attributed falsely to G.K. Chesterton or C.S. Lewis, but the guy said that every man who knocks at the door of a brothel is unconsciously seeking God. Now, it might be like, well, that's kind of strange. If he wants to seek God, he could maybe like go to a church, not necessarily a house of prostitution. What does he mean there? Men desire to see beauty, but even more, we desire to be seen by beauty. to be desired by beauty and to become one with beauty. I think in the same respect, women long to be beautiful, to be seen as beautiful, and to be desired by someone who wants to become one with you. This is not like some just like base, evil sexual urge. No, the sexual drive is a gift from God. What this is actually a foretaste of the beatific vision, to actually behold perfect beauty, to be seen and found beautiful by it, to be desired by it, and to become one with it in a blissful, eternal exchange of love. This is good news. This is just not about sex. This is about our ultimate longing for being united with the most blessed Trinity. Smack in the middle of the Bible is the Song of Songs. This is steamy stuff. I mean, your breast, your neck, your lips, you name it, like it's basically in there. And the word God isn't even mentioned once in the pages of the Song of Songs. But there was a first century rabbi, Rabbi Akiba was the guy's name. He said, all the ages are not worth the day on which the Song of Songs was given to Israel. For all the writings are holy, but the Song of Songs is the holy of holies. And so what he's getting at is this one flesh union of a man and a woman is a sign that points us towards heaven. But if we just our culture flips the sign around. It's like one of those old cartoons, or I don't know, it's a Wile E. Coyote or Bugs Bunny or whatever, and they kind of take the sign of saying the road goes this way, they flip it around, and the other character like runs off the cliff. This is what's going on with these romance novels. There's something that you're aching for. There's a sign pointing to you something good, but it's turning it inward instead of upward. And so I am not here today to shame your ache. I want to actually remind you of that ache and invite you to allow yourself to feel it with the pain of aloneness, the cravings you might have for total self-giving. This all in the end points you towards heaven, not towards hell. I want to challenge you in love to lean into that ache and that feeling instead of just medicating it with false consolations. These books are a counterfeit of what you ache for. Look at the writings of St. Paul. He says, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is gracious, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, think about these things. What you've learned and received and heard and seen in me, do, and the God of peace will be with you. And so your deep craving for love is not going to be satisfied in these passing caricatures of romance and lust. You're created for an eternal love. And I know it can be frustrating when you're not finding it in today's culture of guys who are failing to initiate, or when they do initiate, they're just initiating lust instead of initiating love. But be patient. Keep your standards high as heaven. Trust God, not only with your body and your heart, but trust him with your imagination as well.